All right, let's start with the third lecture. Okay. Now, so far we have discussed many other things like data types and indexing. And now one other thing that I want to discuss with you is called functions. Okay. Now, functions are actually two types. One is called built-in functions, and another one is user-defined functions. By built-in, actually it means the MATLAB has already created some functions for us. We can use those things. Okay. The user defined is I am going to define a function by myself. Okay, and in the next week we'll actually see how to actually write these functions, user defined functions. But in this week we'll be working with built-in functions. Okay, so let's start. Okay, you need to actually understand very nicely how you can actually apply a built-in function. Okay, so give a little concentration here. It is very simple, nothing to worry about. The structure of a function is actually kind of like this. The output, okay, is equals to my function name. So this is my function name. Okay, there are different, sorry, my function name, and this is the input parameters. Okay, input parameters. It can be one parameter, two parameter, and so on, many parameters. It's okay. So this is the very basics. Okay, I have a function name that is the built-in function name defined by MATLAB. Okay, and this is the input that I am going to provide, and this is the output that I am going to get. Okay, very simple. So for example, say let's take a look in the MATLAB. Actually, let me close this one for now. Okay, I have this. I create an array. For example, say a is equals to 7, 3, 9. Okay, so I have an array now. Okay, three elements, 7, 3, 9. Now, say I want to find out what is the maximum element in this array. Okay, the maximum element in this array. Okay, now when you are writing C, you can actually go through a for loop, use a for loop. You can go through one by one and see what is the maximum, but we don't actually use those things. We use those techniques in MATLAB. Now MATLAB has a very high level language, so there are many built-in functions to actually solve all those things. To solve this thing in particular, to find out the maximum element in this array A, I use a built-in function called max. So this is my built-in function and this is my output. Okay, so if I write it, if I just take enter, I have this 9. So 9 is my output. It is automatically actually goes to the output variable answer. Okay, I can also write this way. For example, say okay, max element. So I can also define something like max element is equals to maximum of a. Okay, so now the max element here, you can see the workspace, all the variables are actually defined here. Max element is equals to 9. Okay, so this is our the common structure output. So our output actually was the output that we defined. That was our maximum element. Okay, that was the name we defined. It is just the name, but the name of the function was max. Okay, and the input was an array. Okay, so on. Now, so one thing to remember here is that this name is very important to remember. Okay, this max. Okay, you will see there are hundreds and thousands of built-in functions in MATLAB. Okay, no one can actually memorize all of those things, but it is actually very good practice to create a list, okay, of all the built-in functions you are learning. Okay, so what I do, I actually have a notepad for MATLAB. So there I have something like built-in functions name, and whenever I learn a new built-in function, I always keep it there. Okay, write it there so that I can actually use it, memorize, remember those things later on. And it is actually very good practice. All the built-in functions that I will actually introduce you. So please write those things in a separate notebook. It will come in very handy later on. You will see. Okay, so let's go there again. So we have seen one built-in function, say max element, and max element, that's max of a. Also we can also use another one, for example, say min element, okay, is equals to say min of a. This is another. It gives me, sorry, what is my a? 739. Yes, so 3 is the minimum element, so I have the minimum element as 3. So these are two built-in function, max and min. Now let's actually go a bit further. Okay, a bit further, that is, this maximum element doesn't have to be, this output variable doesn't have to be only one. There can be multiple output variables. So for example, if I come here, if I write max element comma idx. If you remember, idx is the index. If you remember from the last video, we talked about linear indexing, and that is what we are going to trying to do. I'm defining the same function max a, but I want two outputs, maximum element and idx. If you look at this variable, this 9 is the third element. So using the same function, I can actually also get two outputs at the same time. So this is my maximum element and this is my index of that element. This is 3. Similarly, we can actually do this minimum element. Okay, minimum element index. So sorry, min of a. Now 3 was the second element. 3 was the second element of a. So I can actually get out two outputs at the same time. So here, when I'm using this output, it can also look like this, and the output can be like output comma index. Okay, and these are actually remaining the same. It actually means that the output can also be also take two outputs at a time. It can also become three outputs at a time. Okay, or four outputs. This is actually multiple outputs. Okay, now take a look at some other thing. For example, if I define a matrix, say for example p is equals to magic 4. If you remember, let's use magic 3 for now. Okay, so this is my a matrix, b is a matrix. Now let's try to use the max function again, maximum of b. But what do we get here? I am not getting the maximum element of this matrix, rather I am getting three elements. What it means, it actually means that when I'm using the same function for a matrix, it will give me the column wise maximum. You can see 8 is the maximum of this column, 9 is the maximum of this column, 7 is the maximum of this column. So when you are actually using this same function maximum for actually a matrix, so I'm getting this column wise maximum. And in matlab, everything actually works column wise by default. Okay, you remember this. Whenever actually you are applying function like this, everything actually done by column wise. For example, the linear indexing that you saw, it was also column wise. So again, we can actually do something is like m comma idx I, that was the maximum of p. I want to see the both output. Now you can see I have 8 9 7. This is the maximum element also. Okay, the element, the 8 was the first element, so I am getting 1. 9 was the third element of this column. Remember, this is no longer by linear indexing in this matrix it should be 6, but I am getting 3 because it is now considering only this column. In this column, this is the third element, so that is the index. The 7 is the second element, so that is the index. So it is giving me the column wise maximum and the column wise maximum elements index. Okay, if you just don't understand, just pause and see this video again. Okay, so that you can actually understand properly. Okay, and let me show you another example. For example, c is equals to let's create a like so I of 5. Okay, so this is actually a I is another built-in function, so you don't have to know these things now. Now I actually do the same thing. Okay, m comma I of c. As you can see, all of the maximum element of each of the column was 1, but the indexing was first element, second element, third element, fourth element, and fifth element. So the index actually changing. Okay, so and this can actually happen. So in the function, I have a built-in function. It can take input parameter and it can actually provide one output, or it can also provide multiple outputs. Now say now let's look at something else. In the previous function, that was our magic 3, we got the maximum element of column wise. What if we want to get the maximum elements row wise? What should we do? Okay, now the technique is say for example m comma I was maximum of p, something that is like this. Okay, no, it actually shows some error. What is the error? Max with two matrices to compare and whatever. So it is not actually giving me the output. What is the mistake? So how can I actually know, okay, what is the mistake I'm making? Or say I want to do this task, I want to find out the maximum of each row. Okay, where can I find those things? That is actually very important. Understand how to actually find those things. It is something here. You can see there I have written the max. So if I write max, okay, this is what we call the documentation, MATLAB documentation. Okay, every details of the function, how to apply the function, how to use the function, everything is written in the documentation. Now if I go here, we'll see Okay, and for example, this is the first one, maximum element of an array. For time series data, we don't need to go this one. I want to find the maximum of an array. If I click it, okay, a MATLAB documentation file will appear. Okay, this is the documentation. You can see the maximum. This is the name of the function, and this is the definition. Maximum elements of an array. Okay, now these are all the possible syntax that we can actually use. Okay, for example, this was the one that we have used so far, and this was the one that we used later on, maximum of m comma I. This is the maximum and this is the index. The description of these syntaxes is also given here below. Okay, now later on I will actually show you very precisely how to actually use this documentation, and it is very important that you learn how to use this documentation, because there are so many built-in functions out there. It is not possible for me to actually teach you everything. You have to find those things by yourself. Now let's see, let's take a look. I wanted to find the maximum of each row. Let's go here. Okay, you can see in the second one I have something like max of a is the array. There is a third bracket, then I have a dimension, dim. So let's go to the description and see in the second one what does it say. Returns the maximum element along dimension dim. For example, if a is a matrix, max of a, this third bracket, okay, this third bracket, or you can say the square brackets, and then this 2 will give me a column vector containing the maximum value of each row. That means I didn't use this one, I did a mistake. Okay, so if I use this one, then I will actually get it. So you can also look at this example. If you just click it here, it will automatically take you to an example. You can see, and then here you can see this is actually using this. So let's go there, let's go again and use this. So here I tried this maximum of m comma b comma 2. Let's try this one. Okay, so now you can see this was my original b. So the first the maximum of this row was 8 and the index was 1. Maximum of the second row was 7, the index was 3, and the third row is 9 and the index is 2. Here we can understand we can actually use this way. So this is the way we can actually apply this same function in different way. A function, so if you write it, a function can take one input, output can be one output. It can take multiple inputs and multiple outputs. So in short, let me write, the function can be a system of, that is called SISO, single input single output; MISO, multiple input single output; SIMO, single input multiple output; or a MIMO, multiple input multiple output. So this is actually 4 types. You don't have to actually memorize those things. You will automatically understand when you actually write many functions. And before I actually finish, let's say one other thing I want to show. Say for example, this was my matrix, and I want to find out the maximum of the whole matrix, not just the column wise or row wise. I want to find out what is the maximum element of this whole matrix. So what I can do, so let's say there is something called, oh, sorry, I have the caps lock on, maximum of b. Okay, this one comma, there is term called all. Okay, if I use this, you see this is the 9. So 9 is the maximum of this whole matrix. Okay, so now I can actually see the maximum, but I also want to know the index of that element. How to know this? So I have to define 2 inputs. Okay, by default it will take 1 input, but if I want 2 outputs, by default it will take 1 output. If I want 2 outputs, I have to define it. So say for example m comma I, then I write this, just copy this portion. Okay, copy and paste, but it is not working. It is something saying some error. You can actually again go to this, go to the page, okay, the documentation page, and see what is the error you are actually making. You can actually see by default. So I already know, you can see the m of I maximum of, when I want all, I have to use this term linear. Okay, now if I actually go here, okay, so maximum of a comma all, I can actually use this linear term because I want the linear index. That's why I'm using the linear term. When I say, so this is the 6 because this is the 6th element. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6. This is the 6th element, maximum is 9. And same way I can also do, say for example, mean. Again I can give 1 is the minimum and this was the 4th element. Okay, this way we can actually use this built-in functions. Okay, so try a little bit of some other functions. For example, you can, I would suggest use the mean function. Okay, mean is another built-in function. Try a little bit and it will become clear. Okay, and if you need, you just watch this video again because this is very important, and I hope this is clear. Okay.